见有就能相长，把马给色东波拉，验证这光我这你。把马中的几色张国等关注忙不过几色都主几旬节老这小色。格热巴马色的红马红巴子人格热巴马色的红马红巴子人格热巴马色的红马红巴子格热巴马色的红马红巴子人格热巴马色的红马红巴子人格热巴马色的红马红巴子人格热巴马色的红马红巴子人格热巴马马红巴子人格热巴马色的红马红巴子人格热巴马色的红杰拉达江苏拉达宾旅当所讲的那边啥叫那东帮达住是话当主当专心别人咋的说中等的广播讲话让拉香咋路更个路主正你正着你的南大老师为正你东跟就像是些人年纪的个老我们刚到这边做人马人们都等我的介绍为这做跟老我觉得这样了这样的说这都是这种牛毛牛龙理解这种种子马人们在等我的那个这些种子啦这能都你到张三军到所有的领导家这都个这种这当这你沿着道路们在人家忽然要拦的都马拉巴扎那都马拉巴扎那都马拉巴扎那都马拉巴扎那都马拉巴扎那都马拉巴扎那马拉巴扎那的最等级今天人我在这里道路的们巴拉斯呢挂当当就上路到巴伊路主我别拿觉得说娘姐真不做的你没想送的莫龙真不我家把个人当我咱都什么都东巴的街上拉香茶喽。好，各位师兄，大家晚上好。
Good evening, everyone, tonight.
我们现在开始讲今天晚上的课。那么讲听课之前，请大家发菩提心。
We are going to begin with tonight's teaching now, and before we do, please everyone make an aspiration of bodhicitta with which to listen to tonight's teaching.
那什么叫做菩提心呢？简单的说我们学佛修心都有一个目标，应该有一个目标。那这个目标是什么呢？我们为了帮助天下所有的众生，也就是说让天下所有的众生从轮回当中获得解脱为了做到这个要自己先成佛，为了成佛我们今天来听课那这样子的发心叫做菩提心。
Regardless of whether it's our study of the Buddha's teachings or our practice of the Buddha's teachings, it's necessary that we have a purpose with which we engage in these both. Insofar as what our purpose is in terms of bodhicitta, it is to help all beings to transcend cyclic existence and to attain liberation. And in order to be of assistance to other beings in this way, it's necessary that we first attain Buddhahood ourselves, and in making this aspiration to be of assistance to other beings in delivering them from samsara and attaining Buddhahood, in able to do this, this is our aspiration of bodhicitta.
那么我们今天的课的题目就是佛教的五种起源。
And the topic for this evening's teaching is the Buddhist account of the origin of the species.
大家知道有一本书叫做五种起源那本书就是达尔文写的一个从生物学的角度来解释人的生命的这个诞生的过程和发展的过程。
Everyone no doubt knows a very famous book called The Origin of the Species, written by Darwin, that explains the arising of species of life and its development from the point of view of biology.
他认为 我们人或者是其他的，比如说像动物那他们的衣食不是像我们佛教讲的从前世来到现世，然后再从现世又走到来世并不是这样子。就是最早的时候是海洋生物地等，在海洋里面就诞生了地等生物，然后呢逐渐这个演变最后就是进化到人类那这个就是达尔文的进化论，也就是绝大多数的科学家的这个观点。
So according to Darwin's theory, or his theory doesn't accord with the Buddhist view, which presents the consciousness as something that transmigrates from the past life to the present life and onto future lives. Rather, he posits a view of the development of the species which began with lower forms or primitive forms of human life, beginning with marine life forms that gradually, over a long period of time, evolved into humans.
然后基督教就认为人是上帝创造的，叫做圣创论。
Christians believe that humans were created by God, and so this is a theory of divine creation.
那么佛教他怎么讲他的观点是什么呢？今天我们要给大家简单的介绍佛教的五种起源说。
What does Buddhism have to say about this? Well, tonight I would like to introduce to you the Buddhist approach to the origin of life.
首先佛教它不认为人的意识可以从物质产生，也就是说我们的这个意识它并不是从大脑当中诞生的。
The first thing is that Buddhism doesn't accept that consciousness can arise from matter. That is to say, it does not accept that the consciousness can arise from the brain.
那么虽然科学家说人的这个意识从大脑的神经元诞生的，但是呢，到目前为止还不知道真正的怎么意识怎样从大脑的神经元诞生。
Even though scientists argue that consciousness originates in the neurons of the brain, until the present day, a complete or satisfactory explanation has not been reached as to how this takes place.
第一个，大脑它本身就是一个非常复杂的东西，到现在到目前为止还没有搞清楚大脑它本身是什么样子。
In fact, the brain itself is an extremely complex organ, and at present, too, we haven't arrived at a complete understanding of how it works.
所以不是所有的科学家的观点都是这样子，但是呢，主流科学家的观点到目前为止仍然他们认为人的意识从大脑诞生。
So it isn't all scientists who accept the view that consciousness arises from the brain or in the brain. However, this is the mainstream scientific viewpoint.
好，接下来我们介绍一下佛教这个对五种起源的这种观点。
So I'd like to now talk about the Buddhist view of the origin of life.
然后佛教认为比如说物质可以从物质诞生，但是呢，精神就要从精神诞生也就是说 类似于今生这两个东西就是因为它们的性质、它们的属性都是不一样的，所以呢，物质比如说像我们像我们有些物质方面的这些，比如说它同类的物质，它有它的因和它的果比如说这朵花有它的因和它的果，从它的因就可以诞生它的果，不会从它的因就诞生其他的果。这个因果它不会这样子乱它就是有因这个因和缘是基本上都是相同的，所以呢，物质可以诞生物质，今生就可以诞生今生基本上佛教的观点就是这样子。
To begin with, the Buddhist perspective doesn't accept that matter can give rise to non-matter. So that is to say, we regard the mind or consciousness as having to necessarily arise from a like substance. That is because the basic nature or its basic essence has to be of a similar kind, just as we can understand the relationship of cause and effect in a flower. A flower is able to, a flower seed is able to give rise to a flower. Ultimately, this is a substance of the same kind that possesses a particular cause and effect relationship, and so it is with consciousness. It is regarded as something that doesn't and cannot arise from matter. It must arise from a similar or like substance.
佛教认为佛和众生都还没有出现的时候，比如说佛也不存在然后呢六道轮回也不存在也没有时间，也没有空间，有一个这样子的原始的真正的这个自然的状态，那这叫做佛心，也叫做佛心如来藏。
Buddhism regards there as having been a state prior to the arising of the Buddha and Buddhas, prior to the arising of ordinary beings, prior to the arising of cyclic existence in the 6 realms of samsara, a state prior to time, a prior to space, and this prior state is known as Buddha nature.
那么这个如来藏就是像我们数学上的零一样因为零它还没有其他的数字诞生只是零而已，还没有诞生1，还没有诞生2那它是零，但是它就是所有的这个数字的基础，所有的数字就是要从0开始从0最后就发展到1、2、10这样子。那么佛心就像0一样，从0诞生了其他的数字一样，像0.1、0.2、0.3，最后就变成1。同样的这个佛心就会产生从佛心当中产生了我们的第一个念头。
It's possible to liken Buddha nature to the number or the numeral 0. That is 0 before it has given rise to other numbers, positive integers, 1, 2, 3, etc. 0, although no other numbers are present at this point, is nevertheless the foundation upon which other numbers ascend. And so it's possible to regard Buddha nature as 0, the foundation point or the base point, upon which increments slowly ascend, beginning with 0.1, 0.2, until we reach a full number of 1, and so on. Buddha nature is just like 0, itself capable of giving rise to the first thought.
灵啊，数学的灵，有人说有5000年的历史，但是灵啊，真正灵啊开始使用，就是从印度就开始用这个灵这个东西。那么他们用的时候呢，主要是表示什么呢？表示空心啊。那后来在佛教里面，灵啊，它就是表示空性啊，表示光明啊，它就是一种这样子的符号。
Some say that zero has a history of 5,000 years in mathematics. In any case, it has existed in ancient Indic thought for a long time, connoting emptiness. And so zero has taken this meaning in Buddhist thought as well, zero representing emptiness or luminosity.
我们很多人对这个佛教的物种起源感兴趣，很多人都经常问这样子的问题啊。我们的第一个意识从哪里诞生啊？然后我们的生命最早的时候从哪里诞生？经常都问这样子的问题啊。那么这个问题的答案啊，我们佛教要分显宗和密宗2个部分。那么显宗里面呢没有这个明确的答案。显宗讲轮回是物种从无始以来这样子下来的，所以它不讲第一个年头从哪里来。所以我们在显宗里面呢，显宗的这个经和论里面基本上找不到这个第一个年头是怎么诞生的。
Many people are curious about the Buddhist account of where the first thought or first consciousness arose from. Similarly, many people are very curious about where the first life arose from, where life first emerged from. In terms of Buddhist thought on this, it's necessary to separate the sutric account from the tantric account. And in terms of the sutras, the answer to the question of where the first thought arose from is not particularly clear. That is, cyclic existence is described as something that is beginningless in nature. And so the first thought where it arose from is not something that is provided with a decisive answer. In the sutras and the shastras, there is not a conclusive explanation of this.
但是在密法里面呢，有非常明确的答案密法里面呢，他就讲我们的第一个意识从哪里诞生，然后呢，它为什么要诞生然后怎么样诞生这些都讲得非常清楚的。
However, in the Tantras, a very clear account is given as to where the first thought or where consciousness arose from. That is, where it arose from, why it arose, and how it arose.
比如说一个湖面没有风的时候呢非常非常的平静没有波浪，也没有波纹看上去这个一动不动一个静止的状态一样。比如说一个湖面没有风的时候，就是一个非常平静的状态。
So we might imagine the surface of a lake when there is no wind and there are no waves or ripples on the lake face. It is in a state of perfect tranquility.
然后有了风以后，就风轻轻有个清风吹来的时候，这个湖面上还没有波浪但是有一个很小的波纹。
And then we might imagine a gentle wind that picks up, not sufficient so that there would be waves on the lake face, but small ripples would emerge.
然后这个波纹慢慢的变成了波浪。
And then these small, gentle ripples would gradually become waves.
还有一个，比如说古筝的这个弦，如果我们用手指头没有去动它的时候呢，因为这个弦没有震动所以呢，它没有声音。
Or we might imagine the example of the instrument, the guzheng. The strings on the guzheng, when they are not being moved or not being vibrated, produce no sound.
但是如果我们的手轻轻的一动这个古筝的弦的时候呢，因为它开始震动，就发出声音。
However, if we were to lightly stroke the strings on the guzheng, they would begin to vibrate and a sound would be produced.
那同样的，我们的心的本心最早的时候呢，它是佛心如来藏。那么就是如来藏呢，它没有念头，没有善没有恶，没有任何的念头，它完全是一个非常非常平静，一个绝对的一个平静的状态。
And the state of our original mind is that of Buddha nature, a state with no thought whatsoever, whether positive or negative, a state of great tranquility.
但是这个比如说这个湖面上还没有波浪的时候，还没有风的时候呢，有一个东西是存在的，虽然还没有还没有波浪，也没有波纹但是呢，这个时候就有一个东西是存在什么呢？这个湖面如果有风的话可以产生波纹，然后这个波纹呢也可以变成波浪这个可能性是存在的。这个时候就这个可能性是存在的。
In the case of the lake face, the surface of the lake, when there are no waves or ripples, it's in a very tranquil state. However, even though it is in this tranquil state, it nevertheless possesses the possibility that ripples and waves might manifest in the event of wind. And so even though in its perfectly still state there are no ripples or waves, nevertheless the possibility that they might manifest does exist.
然后古筝的这个弦如果没有人去动它，虽然是没有声音，但是呢这个时候有一个可能性是存在的。可能性是什么呢？如果有人去动它，它可以发出声音这个可能性永远都是存在的。
And it is the same with the guzheng as well. If no one plucks its strings, then it will not produce a sound. However, even if its strings are not being plucked, it possesses the possibility of producing sound.
那同样的，我们的心的本性光明如来藏，它是最原始的状态的时候呢，那这个时候虽然是没有善念，没有恶念没有烦恼没有这些念头都不存在的，但是那个时候有一个东西存在，那个东西是什么呢？如果有其他的因缘的话，那这个光明当中产生第一个念头的可能性这个可能性是存在的。
So it is the same with our original Buddha nature. Even though this most original and pristine state of mind doesn't carry any thoughts, whether they be of a positive, a negative, or a disturbing nature, nevertheless, our Buddha nature does carry a potential or a possibility that if other necessary conditions are present, then the original luminosity may manifest or give rise to thought.
因为它有这样子的可能性存在，所以呢，后来就在这个光明当中，佛性光明当中，就产生了第一个念头。
And it's because of the fact that our Buddha nature possessed or possesses the potentiality or possibility for arising thought, that it is from this state of luminosity that the first thought arose.
那我们有些人有这样子的疑问，那我们以后学佛最后成佛了，那么成佛的时候呢，我们又回到了这个最原始的这个状态，我们就是回归到佛心如来藏的这个状态当中，那会不会成佛了以后又会产生念头，我们又会不会来到这个轮回当中呢？经常有人问这样子的问题。
A lot of people ask the question, when we attain Buddhahood, we return to this original and pristine state of mind. That is, we return to our Buddha nature. Once we return to this point, is it possible that we may continue to give rise to thoughts and may return to cyclic existence? This is a frequent question that is asked.
那个时候不会再产生这样子的念头，为什么不会呢？因为那个时候这个可能性已经不存在。那为什么不存在这个可能性呢？就是因为我们很长时间学佛修心打坐，把我们内心当中就是如来藏当中的如来藏的上面的这些可能性全部被摧毁了这些所有的烦恼的这个种子出现的可能性已经被摧毁了，彻底的从本质上就断除铲除了。所以那个时候呢，因为不存在这个可能性，所以成了佛以后呢，再不会产生这个念头。
The answer to this is that once Buddhahood has been attained, that we will no longer give rise to thoughts of this nature. That is to say, the possibility of these thoughts arising will no longer exist. And this is due to the fact that through our study, our practice, and our meditation, we will have completely eliminated the causes for these thoughts, or the possibility of these thoughts arising at their roots. And it's for this reason that once we have attained the state of Buddhahood, that there is no further possibility of giving rise to these thoughts.
好，这个原始的状态佛心我们什么时候可以回到这个呢？除了我们修心成佛以外，还有一个就是自然就回到这个状态，有一个这样子的时间。这个是什么时候呢？就是死亡的时候。
Aside from when we attain Buddhahood, is there another time when it's possible for us to return to this original state of mind, or to return to our original Buddha nature? There is another time, and this is at the time of death.
人死亡的时候呢，因为自然的就是因为自然的原因，不是人为的，不是因为修心，就是自然的把我们的所有的这些意识最后全部会停止那么停止了以后呢就是我们会回到这个最原始的这个状态，就是回归到佛心当中，但是这个佛心的回归的时间特别的短，所以我们没有训练的人，没有修心的人，基本上感觉不到的。
During death, the return to this original state, or the return to our Buddha nature, is one that takes place naturally. It doesn't take place as a result of our practice or anything like this. It occurs due to the fact that our sense consciousnesses are dissolving, and through this process of dissolution we return to our original state, or our Buddha nature. The period of time that we return to it, however, is very short, and for people who don't have a firm or advanced level of practice, it is generally not possible for them to experience this state of return.
在我们的生命当中可以回到这个原始状态的这个时间就有3个其中一个就是死亡。
During our lives, there are 3 possible times or moments when we can return to this original state. And the first of them is during death.
因为死亡的时候呢，因为他的所有的这个眼耳鼻舌身这个感官全部都停止了，所以没有视觉，没有听觉，没有嗅觉，没有触觉、味觉，所有的这些感受觉受全部都停止了最后呢，我们的意识也停止了，所有的这些人的精神全部停止了以后呢在这个中间就有一个很短的时间当中呢，就是这个本来的面目它会露出来了但是呢，因为我们没有训练，我们根本就不知道发生了什么事情。
During death, it's possible due to the dissolution of our sense consciousnesses, that is, our eye consciousness, ear, nose, taste, and touch consciousnesses, that we may experience this return to our original state. After the sense consciousnesses dissolve, then our mind consciousness follows, and then there is an extremely brief period of time when our original state exposes its face. However, without a proper or a sufficiently advanced level of practice, it is not possible to apprehend this state as it is.
然后有训练的人呢这个时候我们的意识全部停止了以后呢，自然就回到了这个原始状态，这就是禅宗讲的明心见性就是回到了这个状态。那么因为他还没有死的时候呢，已经有了这个训练那么这个时候就遇到了这个佛性的时候呢，他一下子就认识到了，这个就是佛性然后呢认识到了以后呢，他可以在这个佛性当中就安住在这个佛性当中，明心见性如果修得好的话，那就是在这个当中安住了以后，就不再会轮回了，不再会有第一个念头再出现。所以呢这个时候他就会成佛的，这叫做中阴解脱藏传佛教里面叫做中阴解脱。
However, it is possible for a practitioner of a sufficiently advanced level, that is, a practitioner who has meditated on this during their lifetime, to, during the state of death, immediately recognize when they have reached or arrived at this original state, and immediately recognizing it for what it is, that is Buddha nature, they are able to abide in this state, and in so doing realize their self-nature, or realize the basic nature of the mind as it's put in the Chan tradition, and in so doing transcend cyclic existence, and thereby not return to the state where it is possible to give rise to any further thoughts. And in so doing, they will have attained Buddhahood, and this is what we refer to in the Tibetan tradition as attaining liberation during the intermediary or Bardo state.
第二个呢就是我们每天晚上睡眠的时候，深度的睡眠的时候，就会回到这个状态。
And the second time or moment in life where it is possible to return to this original state is every evening during our deepest time of sleep.
那第三个呢成佛的时候，就是彻底的回到了这个状态当中。
And the third moment is upon attaining Buddhahood, and this is a complete and utter return to our original state.
好，那这个就是我们今天讲的第一个我们的最原始的状态，就是我们的第一个念头，第一个意识它的来源源头就是这个光明的佛心。
So this is what we are talking about tonight. That is our first thought and the first consciousness arose from or arises from our luminous original state of Buddha nature.
这个不仅仅是一个理论这个有一个实际的这个训练的方式，有一个实际的修法，然后我们可以把我们的每一个念头诞生了以后可以把它可以把这个念头我们可以追回去，追到最原始的它的来源就是说我们诞生了一个念头的时候呢，我们可以关注它，然后呢会发现它回归它的原始的这个状态，也就是我们每一个念头诞生的时候然后呢它会毁灭的，然后毁灭的时候我们再进一步的去关注的时候呢，当它毁灭之后，我们会发现它的这个来源，它的源头。
This, of course, is not just a theory. There is a concrete way that we can go about verifying this through pursuing our thoughts as they arise. After a thought has arisen, it is possible to follow it, to observe it, and to watch where it returns to or where it ceases.
好，然后呢，第一个我们的念头的来源是这样，然后这个叫做在藏传佛教里面呢这个它的这个本来的面目叫做目光明，目和子目光明，然后我们这个还没有死亡之前，证悟的这个智慧证悟的这个智慧叫做自光明然后呢，我们一个人死亡的时候，然后他就认出来他的这个本来的面目的时候呢，这叫做目自光明的结合那个时候呢，他就在这个光明当中认识到明心见性然后就可以中阴解脱。目光明和自光明目光明就是佛心，就是目光明然后我们认识到佛心的这个智慧叫做自光明，然后中阴身的时候我们这个所有的意识停止的时候，发现这个它的本来的面目这个叫做目自光明的结合。
So in the Tibetan tradition, our Buddha nature is referred to as Mother Luminosity. The realization of this Buddha nature prior to our deaths is referred to as Child Luminosity or Sun Luminosity. And then at the point of death, when our consciousness, our sense consciousness and our mind consciousness has dissolved and we realize the basic nature of our mind, then at this point it is described as a combination or a unity of mother and child luminosity.
我们今天讲的这个就是在讲一个我们每一个人的精神世界的一个最深的层面。
So what we're really talking about is the deepest, most layer of the human mind.
我们基本上不了解我们自己，更加的不了解我们的精神世界的本质。
Not only do we not understand ourselves, we have an even lesser knowledge or even less complete knowledge of our own human minds.
像心理学、哲学等等都在揭示人的这个精神世界，但是呢，都停留在这个表面的现象，没有一个是能够讲得很透彻的。
Psychology and philosophy disciplines such as this all attempt to explain the human mind. However, most of them only succeed in doing so at a relatively superficial level, and none have arrived at a particularly penetrating or complete account.
然后它的最深层次的这个状态是不是我们用语言来描述，而是我们的亲身体会，可以用亲身体会去感受，这样子就是更加的清楚。
This deepest, most level is not one that we are able to explain through language. It is only one that we are able to gain an understanding of through direct and personal or direct experiential understanding.
那么亲身体会的这个方法，在藏传佛教里面就叫做梦瑜伽。
And this kind of direct personal experiential understanding is called in the Tibetan tradition dream yoga.
因为这个梦瑜伽跟这个死亡和回归最原始的这个状态这几个之间有一个非常密切的关系。
There is an extremely close connection between the practice of dream yoga, or the state that can be arrived at in the practice of dream yoga, and the state of returning, and the return to our basic original state.
如果我们想深入的去了解一下我们的精神世界的这个本来的面目，那就是需要学这些。
If we hope to gain an understanding into the original and basic state of our minds, then it's necessary for us to learn about these things.
那我们一般的学佛，就平时我们诵经做好事就是烧香拜佛，那这种学佛呢，其实这些都可以不学的。
And if this is what we are oriented to, then the other ways of practicing Buddhism that we are accustomed to, such as reciting sutras and doing positive deeds and making incense offerings and so on, these are things that we can afford to do without.
我想我们今天在座的可能一部分，也许是大部分的人都是初学者，佛教的初学者。那么初学者，我们刚刚进来的时候就是讲这些，可能也许没有太多的收获，但是呢，我们先去了解一下也可以的。
It's possible that the majority of people here tonight are relatively new to Buddhism, and so perhaps talking about these things isn't something that you'll gain a great immediate benefit from. However, it is good to at least listen to teachings about this to begin with.
好，我们继续讲这个我们的意识，第一个意识怎么诞生。
So we're going to continue talking about how it is that consciousness or the first thought arose.
中国有一句话，就是先有鸡还是先有蛋？
China, in Chinese, there is a question about whether what came first, the chicken or the egg.
先有物质世界还是先有精神世界呢？佛教会讲首先这个物质世界、精神世界都不存在，然后呢，诞生的时候，他们两个是同时诞生的。
So what came first, matter or mind, or matter or spirit? In terms of Buddhism's answer to this, it would be that to begin with, there was neither matter or mind, and when they arose, they did so simultaneously.
那么它这个诞生呢，我们在光明的这个佛心当中首先是诞生了一个非常非常细微的念头，人的意识诞生了非常细微的人的意识，同时这个意识它就感受到不同颜色的光。
When the first thought or the first consciousness arose, it did so in the form of an extremely subtle kind of thought or an extremely subtle kind of consciousness, one that experienced different kinds of light.
那在这个之前呢，就像物理学讲的宇宙大爆炸的时候一样，在宇宙大爆炸刚刚发生的一个非常非常短的时间当中呢，它有一个没有时间没有空间的概念的这么一个很短很短的时间。
We might liken this time to the very first moments of the Big Bang as it's described by physicists. That is, in the first very, very smallest increment of time after the Big Bang occurred, there was a moment in which there was yet no world, there was no space, there was still not yet anything.
然后这个时间过了以后，很快就诞生了这些基本的这些粒子很细微的基本粒子，然后呢，慢慢就有了这个物质世界。
However, after this time passed, then very quickly there emerged or arose the first basic or most smallest elements of matter, and from this the world developed.
同样的，我们的原始的这个状态当中呢，没有时间、没有空间的概念，但是呢，在这个原始状态当中，就产生了非常细微的这个意识。那这个时候呢，我们刚才讲了，他就感觉到光的存在，但是这个时候他不是因为他的眼睛看到了光，因为这个时候呢，还没有形成了人还没有形成物质世界，这是一个他自己的内在的感受。
So it is like this with the original state that we speak of in relation to Buddhism. This was a time or a state where there was not yet time and there was not yet space. However, this extremely subtle first consciousness was capable of experiencing light. And this was not something that was experienced with its eyes, it was experienced of and unto itself. So this was not yet a time when matter had arisen or emerged, and similarly no humans had arisen either.
这个原始的状态呢就是就中国有一句话叫远在天边近在眼前就是说这个原始的这个状态如果我们没有证悟没有证悟的人来说呢，那这个很陌生我们可能很多人也不知道到底在说什么但是一个证悟的人来说已经达到了明心见性的这个地步的人来说，那他可以随时他可以找到这个原始的状态所以呢就叫做近在眼前对没有证悟的人来说呢很远，这个离我们很遥远，所以叫做远在天边。
So this is the original state is one that is perceived by someone who is not awakened as extremely far away. However, to someone in the awakened state, it is something that can be perceived at any time. So it is one, depending on one's state of realization, which may appear alternatively very close or also possibly very far away too.
好，我们的第一个最细微的这个念头意识诞生的时候呢，他就感觉到了光的存在。那这个时候呢，他把有些光，他认为他是自己对有些光产生了自我的这种执着从此以后就是有了一个我的执着。有些光，他认为他是自己。比如说我们现在看我们的肉体，我们会认为是我自己那把有些光他就当作自己，有些光呢他就当作是外面的世界那从此以后呢，这个瞬间以后就诞生了你我他内外还有就是精神世界物质世界这样子的这个分别。
So it is from this most subtle initial sense of consciousness that was capable of perceiving or experiencing light that the original or initial sense of self emerged. That is, this extremely subtle consciousness regarded some of these forms of light it was able to experience as belonging to itself, much like we regard parts of our physical body as belonging to ourselves. And at the same time, it perceived other forms of light as belonging to the external world. And in so distinguishing these different kinds of light, concepts of me, you, him, and her arose, concepts of outer and inner, and concepts of mind and matter.
从此以后就产生了这个世界，就有了这个世界。
And from this point on, the world arose.
这跟我们做梦的时候是一模一样的。我们人进入了深度的睡眠的时候呢，我们没有任何的感受，没有任何的感觉。然后从这个没有感觉的这个状态，用佛教的话来讲，这叫做悟念，就是没有念头的悟念。从悟念的这个状态当中，然后就开始做梦开始做梦，然后就产生了梦的世界从此以后呢，他在这个梦里面就感觉到了一个完整的这个世界。
And this process is exactly the same that we experience in our sleep. So in our deepest period of sleep, this is one in which we do not experience the operating of our sense consciousnesses. It is a state that we would refer to in Buddhist terminology as one of no thought. And moving on from this state, we move into our dream state. We enter into our dream worlds, and from this point, we experience a world that is in every respect as real as that of our everyday lives.
从此以后呢，有了这个六道轮回，就是有一个人诞生了，那么这个人的世界也就诞生了，他的精神诞生了以后呢，他的世界也就诞生了，那这个世界上就有了这么一个众生。
So we say that from this point onwards, cyclic existence emerged. That is, the first human emerged, the first thought or the first consciousness, and so with it came the world.
但是呢，很多时候我们可以回到这个原始的状态。
However, it is possible for us at times to return to the original state.
比如说，我们很多东方的人移民到西方，或者是西方的人移民到东方 定居，但是呢，它在这个过程当中呢，也会很多时候也会东方然后有很多时候也会西方这样，比如说东方移民过来的人，他虽然是移民了定居了，但是呢，他很多时候还会东方然后呢，从西方移民到东方的人那虽然是他已经定居在这个东方了，但是呢，他很多时候也会回到这个西方一样。我们从光明当中移民到这个轮回当中了，我们现在已经在轮回当中定居了，但是我们很多时候还有机会回到这个光明光明，但是最遗憾的就是我们回到了，但是我们不知道我们回到了这个光明当中。
So this possibility of returning to our original state is much the same as people from the East to migrate to Western countries and settle down there permanently, but still frequently return to their homelands or places of birth, or at the same time, people from the West to migrate to Asia and settle down there permanently, but also frequently or from time to time return to their original countries too. So we could say that even though we have moved from our original state of luminosity and settled down permanently into cyclic existence, it nevertheless is possible for us to return to our original state. The regrettable thing, however, is that most people upon returning to this state are not aware of the fact that they're doing so.
然后这个我们每一次从这个最原始的佛心当中诞生了第一个念头的这个过程，实际上我们每一天都在经历，比如说我们深度的睡眠，从睡眠再回来这个过程当中有一个这样子的这个全部的过程，但是我们没有训练的人就根本就不知道我们只知道我们还没有没有睡眠的时候是什么样子，然后只知道我们醒过来时候是什么样子，在这个中间深度睡眠的时候，这个中间发生了什么，我们根本不知道。
So every day, in fact, we go through this same process that is the process from which the first thought arises from our basic original state. When we undergo a complete sleep cycle, that is, from falling asleep till waking up, we go through a similar process. However, we in general have no understanding of what takes place during our deepest moments of sleep. We're only aware of the fact that we have woken up and now we're woken up. In fact, understanding what takes place in the deepest moments is not something that we are able to do without practicing, cultivating a strong practice in this regard. And it's on account of a lack of practice, a lack of training, that we don't have an understanding of this process that we undergo on a daily basis.
然后有一个训练，我们刚才讲的梦瑜伽，如果通过这种训练的方式训练的话，那他一个人从现实生活当中怎么样进入了这个睡眠深度的睡眠，在这个过程当中发生了什么，然后呢睡眠的状态当中又回来的时候呢，那这个过程当中发生了什么这一切都是看得清清楚楚的。比如说我用我们的肉眼看一个强的子弹穿过了一个苹果的这个过程那我们根本是没办法看到的，我们的肉眼是没办法看到的。但是高速摄影机它可以拍下来，然后给我们放出来的时候呢，我们的肉眼也可以看到子弹从这个苹果的外面然后就传出了另外一面整个的这个过程看得很清楚同样的， 我们没有训练的人进入睡眠的状态过程我们没办法知道，从睡眠当中回来的这个状态我们也没有办法知道，这个当中就是有些发生了什么心理的变化心理变化我们不知道，但是有了这个梦瑜伽的人，训练过的人，那么他在整个的过程来回的过程他都非常的清楚的。
So the practice of dream yoga is one that enables practitioners, in fact, to be aware and gain understanding of the entire sleep process, that is, from transitioning from a state of wakefulness into deep sleep, and then returning to the waking state again. This is something that practitioners of dream yoga are able to cultivate understanding and insight into. So just as with our naked eye, if a gun was to shoot a bullet and this bullet were to pass through an apple, it wouldn't be possible for our naked eye to perceive or to see the increments of movement with which the bullet passed through the apple. If we had a sufficiently high-powered camera which was able to document the process, then frame by frame it would be possible for us to see the bullet entering the apple, passing through it, and then exiting it again. So it's the same with the sleep process. By practicing dream yoga to a sufficiently advanced level, it's possible to observe the changes in our state of mind as we move from a state of wakefulness, enter into the deepest period of sleep, and then return to our wakeful state again. Practitioners of dream yoga are able to have great clarity into this process.
这样子以后呢，我们佛教就是揭示了我们的第一个意识它是怎么诞生的，这就是佛教的五种起源，精神世界方面的五种起源。
So this is the Buddhist explanation of the origin of life, or the origin of life in terms of the arising of consciousness or the arising of mind.
然后物质呢，就是佛教讲我们的外面的这个世界，就是我们的心的投影。
And in terms of material, or in terms of matter, from the perspective of Buddhism, all of what is in the external world is considered a projection of the mind.
佛教里面有一句话叫做相由心生相就是我们的外面的这个形形色色的这个世界，那么它有心生，就是我从我们的心当中产生的意思呢，就是说比如说我们通过投影机看电影的时候，我们在这个屏幕上看到的这些画面它不在这个屏幕上而在这个投影机里面，它的源头这些画面都在这个投影机里面那么就是因为有了这个投影机，然后就外面就可以看出一个这个画面。同样的，外面的这个世界是我们的内心的一种投影。
In Buddhism, we talk about external phenomena as arising from the mind. And what we mean by this is that the external world and external phenomena are really projections of our mind. So just as in a cinema, what we see on the movie screen is in fact projected onto that screen using a projector machine. In fact, the image, what we are seeing, resides in the projecting machine and not on the screen itself. However, it is because of the projecting machine that we are able to see the image as it is projected on the screen. And so it is with the external world and external phenomena. These are projections of our minds.
佛教它不是唯心论它更不是唯物论。如果我们希望佛教也有一个像唯心、唯物等等这样子的一个名称的话，那佛教应该叫做唯幻论幻就是幻觉、错觉为什么这么讲呢？因为这个外面的这个世界是我们的内心当中投影出来的一个幻觉、一个错觉仅此而已。在外面没有别的东西，这是我们自己的一个投影。就像我们做梦的时候晚上做梦的时候，我们可以看到人，可以看到建筑物，可以看到大自然但是呢，这一切都是这个做梦的人的他自己的心的投影。实际上他做梦的时候，这个世界是不存在的那么现实生活呢也是一样的，它两个的原理这两个世界的存在的这个原理都是一样的。所以他得到的结论就是唯幻论外面就是一个投影而已，是我们自己的心的投影而已。
Buddhism or Buddhist thought can't be considered idealist, and it cannot neither be considered materialist. In fact, if we had to give a label to Buddhism's stance, it would be perhaps more correct to call it illusionist. And in so saying, we refer to the Buddhist belief that the world and external phenomena are in fact illusory. That is, they are mistaken perceptions. That is, in our dream state, it's possible for us to see people, buildings, nature that appear to, in fact, be very real and appear to the person who is undergoing or experiencing the dream to be very real. But ultimately, these are just projections of our own minds. And in fact, so it is exactly the same in our everyday lives with everything that we perceive in the external world. Both our dreams and our perceptions in everyday waking life are underpinned by the same fundamental principle, and that is one of whereby what we perceive is in fact a projection of an illusory projection of our own minds.
所以佛教认为这个世界它是什么样子它是什么样子，不是以这个世界来决定，而是我们的感官和我们的心来决定。
So it's for this reason that Buddhism regards the external world as ultimately determined not by the external world itself, but by our own consciousnesses, that is, by our sense consciousnesses and our mind consciousness.
这个很简单，比如说我们一个地球上的一个地球人的正常的眼睛它可以看到的这个光那是我们今天看到的这些颜色那么它的这个光可见光，它的上面和下面最边缘上的一个是紫色，一个是红色。
An analogy for this would be a person, a human who dwells on the earth, that which they are able to see with their own eye consciousness, with their eye sense of vision, the spectrum, the visible spectrum of light that they are able to see. at the extreme margins of this visible spectrum of light are purple and red zones.
如果我们的人的眼睛的这个看到的这个光波的范围稍微再狭窄一点点稍微再短一点的话，那么我们的世界里没有这个颜色，我们任何人看不到红色，我们根本就不知道什么叫做红色，所以我们的语言当中呢也不会出现红色这个词。
If the human capacity to read electromagnetic waves was slightly shorter than what it is, then it wouldn't be possible for us to perceive or see the color red.
所以我们的生活当中，我们的物质世界里有没有这个颜色，不是它这朵花来决定，而是我们的眼睛来决定。
So in fact, whether this flower contains or possesses the color red is not something that is determined by it, it is determined by our own eyes.
也许我们有些人觉得这个很简单当然了，我们没有眼睛，我们怎么能看得到呢？因为有眼睛我们看得到这些，我们闭上眼睛什么也看不到，不是这么简单的道理，不是这样子，就是因为它本来是没有这个红的这个颜色，这个世界上没有什么叫做红，物质世界是没有的但是呢，因为我们的眼睛可以看到这样子的光，所以我们的生活当中就产生了一个红色这样子的东西。
Some people might be of the view that, well, of course, we can't see color if our eyes are not open. If our eyes are closed, we can't see color, and we see color when our eyes are open. But this is not really what we're arguing. We're saying that the color red, in fact, doesn't reside anywhere in the material world. It's only on account of our capacity to perceive certain light waves that we perceive the color red.
所以佛教他认为要控制我们的心改变我们的心，等于就是改变这个世界。
So it's for this reason that Buddhism regards being able to control our minds, or if we are able to control our minds, then it is possible for us to also change the external world.
所以佛教不会到外面的这个世界上面去找太多太多的答案，他的所有的答案到这个内心的世界里面去寻找。
And it's on account of Buddhism's conviction that change in mind is capable of changing the world that it doesn't turn to the external world much to seek answers. Rather, it turns inwardly to the inner world.
那我们所有人实际上我们大家都不知道我们生活在一个什么样的世界里，这个世界到底是什么谁都说不清楚。
Actually, in terms of what it is the nature of the world that we are living in, this is something that no one is really able to say clearly.
那深入研究了以后呢，比如说像物理学他就发现了很多很多我们常人就是根本就无法理解的真相，比如说像量子力学这样子的东西，我们一般的人根本是没有办法理解的，他也发现了很多这样子的事情。
However, upon more probing investigation, physicists, for example, have been able to discover all kinds of phenomena that ordinary persons are simply not able to comprehend, such as quantum physics and so on.
那佛教就是往精神世界去寻找答案，然后呢，他们也在精神世界里面找到了很多这个我们常人无法理解的真相。
Buddhism, by corollary or by contrast, turns to the inner world to seek answers, and in a similar way has discovered here a great number of phenomena that are also difficult for ordinary people to comprehend.
我们今天讲的都不是一个具体的这个修法它是一个理论，但是这个理论呢，跟我们的修行很有关系的。
So what we're talking about today isn't a specific method of practice. We're really talking about theory. However, this theory has a great connection to our practice.
然后这个我们跟我们的修行有什么样的这个关系我们怎么样把这个理论用到这个修行当中这些我们要进一步的去学习。
What, in fact, this connection is between this theory and our practice, and how we go about bringing this theory into connection with our practice, is something that requires more study on our own part.
好，我们的这个这就是我们今天要讲的这个佛教的物种起源我现在要把这个我们刚才讲的这些总结一下。
So I'd just like to recap now the main points that we've covered tonight in our teaching on the Buddhist understanding of the origin of life.
好，我们的外面的这个物质世界，它的来源，它的源头就是我们的精神世界。
The first being that the external material world, its origin lies in our minds.
这是第一个结论。
That's the first conclusion or point that we made tonight.
好，第二个就是我们的精神精神世界的来源，它的源头就是佛心光明的佛心这是第二个结论。
And the second point or the second conclusion is that the origin of our minds is our luminous Buddha nature.
好，这些我们怎么样去修，怎么样去用要进一步的去学习，我们就知道这些道理有跟我们的修行有什么关系。
And as to how we go about using these conclusions or insights, how we go about appropriating them in our practice, this is something that we need to go on to gather to gain a further understanding into.
好，今天我们的这个课就讲到这里。好，我们还要做一个回向我们今天上课有功德，这个功德要回向给天下所有的众生。我们以我们今天的功德，能够让天下所有的众生健康长寿、幸福快乐，很快就能够超越生死轮回，以这样子的心愿来做回向。
We're just going to briefly dedicate the merit from listening to this evening's teaching now, and in so doing, make a wish that our merit gained or generated from listening tonight may be shared with all living beings, so that they attain temporary happiness, health, long life, and ultimately freedom from the sufferings of samsara. And in making this wish, so we dedicate our merit.
Sonam de tam je zba nya dom ne ni be da na ban she ja ji ga nan chi wa long zhe ba zhe bin zo lin zhou a zhou er xiu om a hong ban zhen ge zhe ban ma se de hong om a hong ban zhen ge zhe ban ma se de hong om a hong ban zhen ge zhe ban ma se de hong。谢谢大家，阿弥陀佛。